I did a video on a few drivers who I think should be on the Formula 1 grid in 2025, and at the end of the video I posed the question of who on the current grid is at risk of losing their seat for 2025. So let's speak about it. Here is 5 current drivers who I think are at risk of losing their seat at the end of this season. Now I think Williams made the right choice to keep Sargent for 2024, give him, that second season to really prove himself on why he should be on the grid, but just because he kept his seat for 24 does not mean he's going to be guaranteed to keep his drive for 2025. If he wants to keep his drive, he is, I think, gonna have to improve his performances and prove he is worth keeping. During his time so far in F1, his average qualifying position is 17.3 and his average finishing position is 15.1. Now yes, there will be some outside factors that might have affected his qualifying or finishing positions in some races, and yes, he can only do so much with a Williams, but I feel he does need to do a bit more than what he is doing to stay on the grid. In the first 2 races this season, he qualified 18th and 20th respectively, and he finished 20th and 15th on track, but 14th after Tsunoda got a penalty respectively. Yes, he had issues in Bahrain that made him lose a lot of time, I know, and there's only, again, so much he can do with a Williams, and he didn't even get to race in Australia. But my point stands that it's been a bit of an underwhelming start to his 2024 campaign. But the main reason he is at risk of losing his seat is other young drivers lurking around. First and foremost, Kimi Antonelli, who, if he impresses in F2 but Toto Wolff feels he isn't ready for a jump straight into a Mercedes seat, the young Italian could end up being a candidate for that second Williams seat if James Vowles is keen on taking him for a few years before he can make the jump to Mark. But also, and this next option could put a kibosh on Antonelli getting a Williams seat as well, Williams do have a junior driver in Formula 2 this year, Zach O'Sullivan. Now, he was not a driver that came up in my video on junior drivers the other week, but it wouldn't be totally out of the question for him to be a threat for that seat if he has a good season. Because if he doesn't and Vowles feels that Sargent isn't doing enough, it would make sense for him to opt for giving another Williams junior a chance at Williams, opposed to agreeing to take on a Mercedes junior for a couple of years. In all though, I think Sargent might want to keep one eye on his back. Daniel Ricciardo is a driver who is difficult to dislike, and Christian Horner loves him and would probably love to see him back racing at the main Red Bull team. And I'm sure Ricciardo himself would also love that, but as of right now, I think he more needs to worry about simply staying on the grid. He's had his moments since his return mid last season, like in Mexico where he was brilliant, but right now, if he's making a case for getting Checo seats at Red Bull, he ain't making the best job of it. I mean, he ain't even making the best case for keeping the driver Toro Rosso, let's be honest. He's been outclassed by Tsunoda in all 3 races so far, and really only finished ahead of the Japanese driver in Bahrain from team orders, which Yuki was, I think, rightfully annoyed about, because it's not like they were racing for anything meaningful. It wasn't for points, it was for what, P12, P13? In Saudi, Ricciardo was not at all helped with a very long pit stop when he stopped under that early safety car, but he wasn't exactly setting the world alight prior to that anyway, and he also had that spin towards the end of the race, which was his doing, and would not have helped his case much. And as for Australia, I cannot say I noticed him at all, while Yuki had a brilliant weekend, which says a lot. It is early in the season, and I don't want to judge him too harshly because it is early in the season, and I'm also planning to do a separate video talking about Ricciardo, so hence why I don't want to judge him too harshly here. But Daniel does need to pull something out to save his drive, and never mind getting a Red Bull seat, because all I'm saying is Liam Lawson is there, and what are the chances he may get replaced mid-season? Well, it wouldn't surprise me. This is the Red Bull family we're speaking about, and he has allegedly been given an ultimatum that if he doesn't improve in the next 2 races, he's out and Lawson is in. I do have more thoughts on this, but as I said, I'm going to save it for another video. Let's stick with the Red Bull family, shall we? Sergio Perez. Being teammates to Max Verstappen is no easy task, and yes, Perez hasn't had all that in a bad start to the season, which is a bit of a trend. He sets the start seasons very well. I mean, he finished second in the opening 2 races, and his Saudi Arabia race, it really cannot be faulted aside from the unsafe release. However, 1, Bahrain and Saudi are 2 of his strongest tracks these days, and 2, If Leclerc wasn't having brake issues in Bahrain, I'm not so sure Perez would have finished second there. His qualifying does oftentimes leave a bit to be desired, but I'm willing to put that to one side because Checo just seems to be one of those drivers who falls more into the camp of he's more of a race day driver than a qualifying driver. He can do the job in qualifying, he can pull out some brilliant laps, but he just tends to be better in the races. Australia wasn't anything really spectacular from the Mexican. He was nowhere, kind of. Part down to him getting that impeding and qualifying grid drop. Also perhaps part down to maybe Red Bull just didn't get it fully right in Australia. Maybe part down to just him himself. But regardless, Checo was just a little underwhelming. And if we see another mid-season struggle fade Checo like we did last year, then I think he'll be headed for the door. Well, okay, frankly, in my opinion, I think there's only two scenarios in which Checo keeps his drive for 2025. And that's if he either genuinely has a great season and he consistently keeps up with what we saw, you know, in the first two weekends, or two, there's genuinely no other option for Red Bull. And I'm sure Red Bull could always find another option, be it Tsunoda tempting Alonso over from Aston, because I mean, he'll go at the drop of a hat, and I'm sure Carlos Sainz is a free agent for 25, and he genuinely could be an option for them, or hell, just getting Liam Lawson in, although, quite frankly, I see that option as a little unlikely. Now, Red Bull dunna need a driver who can match Max, and frankly, I don't think they want a driver who can match Max. But what they need is to make sure that they have a good, quick second driver who they can rely on to, you know, be up there to back up Verstappen toward a one-way, or to be there to pick up the pieces on the rare occasions where Max does fall off the road, like Australia. And Checo wasn't up there to, you know, pick up the pieces. It was the Ferraris and the McLarens who were there to pick up the pieces. Zhou Guanyu is now in his third season in this sport, and honest to God, if you asked me to name one moment of his on track, any moment at all, the only thing that comes to mind off the top of my head is that crash in Silverstone 2022. He has been one of the most anonymous drivers on this grid, and he hasn't really done much. He's had some high moments, like scoring points on his debut thanks to the Red Bulls conking out late in the race. He had an incredible qualifying of P5 in Hungary last year. He went from 19th to points in Qatar last year, which I do feel like that's not spoken about enough. But overall, he's just been there. The start to his 2024 season certainly hasn't been helped by Sauber seemingly being allergic to making pit stops that aren't slow. And to be fair to Zhou, I owe credit to him where it's due, because he was, after all, the winner of the what I'll call back half of the pecking order Grand Prix in Bahrain. In other words, he was the highest finisher of the bottom 5 teams. But my point remains that he is one of the most anonymous drivers on the grid, and he isn't really impressing that much, to be honest. And with the likes of Teo Porcher hanging around and Zane Maloney doing a good job in F2 right now, and so we're having other options like already racing, like Hulkenberg, who I think they might be keen on, or Sainz, who Audi I think are perhaps keen on. I don't think Zhou will be on the grid next year. Now, as tempted as I am to stick Magnussen on this list, I feel Sauber's other driver of Valtteri Bottas might be more at risk than the Dane. There's a couple of things I said about Zhou that also apply here to Bottas, in that he is incredibly anonymous these days, and the same drivers hanging around that could threaten Zhou's seat are also there to threaten Valtteri's seat as well. The slow pit stops at the start of the season also have not helped things for Valtteri, but once again, even ignoring them, he's just been a bit underwhelming. Continuing on from that trend last year where he was again just underwhelming and kind of invisible. He isn't that in a bad driver, and he is one that's grown to be one of the drivers who is hard to dislike, but being likable off track means diddly squat when his performance is on track for matter for renewing a contract. Bottas is hoping to stick around at the team to be there for Audi coming in, but I do not see that happening. To be honest, I don't think anybody sees that happening. I don't even see him on the grid next year, hence why he's on this list. I think Seidel and Aluni Bravi will be looking to make a change. In fact, that's the thing. They did not hire Valtteri. Or Zhou, for that matter. That was Frederick Vasseur. The Sauber car perhaps isn't the best in that statement, kind of applies for both Sauber drivers here, but they're both still just a little underwhelming. Now, I would say Lance Stroll, but, well, let's be realistic here. I feel the chances of him losing his seat are slim to none. Who do you think is at risk of losing their seat at the end of this season? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.